Good evening. I'm Howard Vicini, and this is my country. Thank you for joining me tonight. I'm extremely pleased to welcome back my friend Ralph Miller, who is in China, helping prepare for the 2008 Beijing Olympic Summer Games. China is a nation both very ancient and very young in ways that the world is struggling to understand. Clearly, the Chinese are aware of this and have decided to stake much of their national reputation on their management of these Olympics. Ralph is here again to give us an inside look at their impressive preparations, as he will be from now throughout the 2008 Games. Hey Ralph, great to have you back.
How are you?
Good. How are things in Beijing?
Since last time we talked, the Olympics celebrated its one-year countdown, and that went off with flying colors, with a big celebration on Tiananmen Square, and fireworks and banners and singers and dancers. And
Excuse me, Ralph, I need to interrupt you for a minute while I show some images from the one-year celebration. I believe it is difficult for us in the U.S. to understand that even young adults in China have grown up in a time when their leaders were often mocked and criticized on the world stage. But now their nation has emerged as a dominant financial power, and a sense of national pride has been emboldened by things like the success of their space program, so that this Olympics has become a national coming out party for the Chinese, and these celebrations took place all over China, with the most lavish of all in Beijing. Even the notorious Beijing smog couldn't dampen the spirits of the young Chinese who danced, sang, played, and endured the political rhetoric of their elders. Pictures may be still, but it's clear that the Chinese are on the march. It must be very exciting to be there.
The city is definitely geared up for the coming year. It's hard to believe that it's actually less than 11 months away now. And we just passed the 330-day mark, and moving our way quickly to the 300-day mark. And pretty soon we're going to be at about 6 months before we start the actual installation of the pavilions on the square, which is the Olympic Green, which is where I'm working on.
Why don't you tell us how things are going on a personal basis? Are you getting the cooperation you need to be ready for the Olympics when the day comes?
Work is going well. We've got the good thing is everybody's geared to the Olympics and getting everything ready, so we have a lot of support from groups and municipal organizations that might otherwise be slow in responding. Have pretty much responded with great haste and dispatch to make sure that they're not holding up the process. So it's a very interesting process to see what they've done here in terms of gearing up for the Olympics, and also just in from an organizational point of view, and then also from an average citizen point of view, seeing how that focus is translating into their day-to-day is pretty interesting.
The Chinese seem determined to show the world that they can manage a major event like this, at least as well, if not better, than everyone else.
Pretty much. I mean, they've got several thousand active construction projects, obviously, in the city. We've got a city of 16 million people, 2 million of which are migrant workers that are here on various construction projects by latest estimates. And they're trying to wrap up all non-Olympic sanctioned projects by March of next year, because there's a moratorium on new construction after that unless it's specific to the Beijing Olympics. So that's where our efforts really begin, is once we start constructing on the green. But for the most part, the large projects are well underway. The big stadium, the national stadium, the Bird's Nest that we talked about last time, is now has the inner membrane put in, which is like the roof that's going into it.
Again, I'm going to interrupt for a minute to show the construction photos you sent, which, along with the architectural rendering, really help to put a human scale on these massive projects.
water structure next door, the water stadium, which is a quite iconic bubble building. It's a air-supported structure, or the walls are a membrane that has a bubble interior and exterior kept in check, and that's an environmental and cost-saving solution for keeping the interior cool. It's pretty impressive. I've never seen a building quite like that. It should be one of the more iconic buildings that we see coming out of the Olympics. The big acrobatic and gymnastics center is also clearing scaffolding from its front. So a lot of those larger stadiums, larger venues are beginning to take shape. And in terms of the city itself, there's a fair amount of freeway construction, new road building, as well as beautification projects. A lot of planting, a lot of trees being planted, certainly on the square, but also throughout the city. But with the coming October Day celebrations, a lot of flowers are being placed throughout the city. So it's getting very colorful as they're coming up to the October Day, which is like our 4th of July celebration in a couple of weeks.
The Chinese are often criticized for not being concerned enough about environmental issues. Clearly, they've decided to put a new face on things with this Olympics.
Well, it's very much a critical component or a key component. I think we mentioned last time the Olympics are technically called the Green Olympics, the Technology Olympics, and People's Olympics. So those three areas of focus really underscore most of what's being done. Most recently, the efforts have been towards renewable resources, water conservation, buildings with as low a carbon footprint as possible. And from our point of view, even with the theatrical elements that we're working on, looking to buy carbon credits so that the impact that we have through our effort on the Olympics is carbon neutral as well. So I think there's a great sensitivity to that. I think China has recognized that they need to do something about the pollution issues and are rapidly closing down coal-burning plants and converting them into steam-powered plants. The effort for renewable vehicles, greener vehicles, is also pretty visible, I think. And I was in a store today where they were selling motorcycles, but they were battery-operated motorcycles. So they're trying to cut out the internal combustion engine for motorcycles. I mean, it's very interesting how once they set their mind to a task, they pretty well apply it across the board. And certainly the people are very aware of it. They're very connected to it and very supportive of the effort. So I think they'll make a lot of progress very quickly, and I think the opportunity of the Olympics certainly is to bring the spotlight of the world to bear on China. And I think what they do with it is going to be interesting to see. But I think also that their focus on making it the best possible, face to the world is something that they've taken very much to heart.
While the greening of the Olympics in and of itself is a major accomplishment, do you get a sense that the Chinese intend to make this a permanent change in the way they're doing business?
No, very much so. They certainly passed the most strict auto emission standards in the world. I think it's going to be a model for California pretty quick here. But certainly with the conversions of the coal-burning plants to steam, I think that's a major step forward. They're building rail systems that are maglev systems. So they're really taking it seriously, and the implementation is very well across the board, from automotive to building materials to day-to-day life. I mean, San Francisco, we just banned the use of plastic bags and styrofoam. A similar thing is happening here in a very broad base. They're concerned about the bottles, the PET bottles that are discarded from beverage containers and the waters and all of that. So big effort at recycling, big effort at building green to start. So I think those kinds of things are really long-term.
You're talking about truly significant changes to the Chinese infrastructure. Is this increasing your cost of doing business in preparations for the Olympics?
Not significantly. I think the opportunity really is to find and the source the right materials. You know, waterless urinals, I think, is a good example. It's not any more expensive. In fact, it's cheaper than a urinal, and you waste a lot less water. Building materials for walls that are made of recycled materials, or using a green roof, for example, doing water harvesting for a big waterfall feature that we have. I think all of those elements are very much in line with the green initiative, but are also not costly implementations, where they're rather more reasoned implementations towards that goal. So I would say it's not. If the impact is any, it's a few percent, but certainly nothing drastic.
When you're talking about water harvesting, are you talking about gray water capture for secondary use?
Certainly our client is doing a fair amount of that in schools around the country, but we're doing it on the Olympic Green as well.
This is quite an undertaking for you as the branding agent for one and now two commercial sponsors of the Olympics.
I think a third trip recently, probably fourth or fifth trip this year, actually. Got another 6 or 7 trips before the actual Olympics.
Does this mean you'll be living in Beijing for a while?
I'll be staying here longer and longer. We're still working out all the necessary work permits and visas. There's an Olympic visa program to allow people like me to stay longer.
As the representative of commercial interests, do you have much opportunity to interact with the Chinese athletes?
Through our work, we do. We're doing some commercial work with them, some appearance work with them, scheduling them for the games. And we've got a dozen or so athletes that are under contract for appearances. So we have some of that. They're starting to restrict their schedules for training. So, we're sensitive to that as well. But we have a fair amount of it.
From your interaction with them, do you get a sense that the Chinese athletes plan to press their home court advantage?
Yes, very much so. We'll see. We'll see. I think China's hoping to be, if not the leading nation, certainly one of the leading nations in medals.
Beijing's air quality has been cited as a potential health threat to the Olympic athletes. Chinese officials have promised to clean up the air quality prior to next year's games. But the president of the International Olympic Committee recently said that endurance events might have to be postponed during the games if necessary. Can you tell us how serious the threat is?
It varies. It's no secret that the air is, how do I get to say? The air is variable in Beijing. Some days it's worse than others. It certainly has shades of LA. In LA's worst, and sometimes shades of Washington, D.C. at its worst. But then this week we had good rain. There was a big storm that came through and cleared things up, and it was absolutely beautiful. I hadn't seen as beautiful a day in Beijing for 10 years. During the Olympics time period back in August, we only had 1 day of rain, but it was also very clear. So it varies. It depends if the the sands of the Gobi Desert are blowing. Also, that makes a big difference.
As you know, Ralph, nearly everyone in San Francisco has some close cultural or personal tie to our Chinese community. So I believe everyone here is looking forward to this Olympic Games with a great deal of anticipation and excitement. While we miss you, I certainly envy your experience there.
It's fun. There's a lot of effort to get things right, and a lot of work still ahead. But I think everybody's very confident that they're going to be able to accomplish and finish their projects in time.
Well, after Athens, it'll be novel to have an Olympic venue with dry concrete.
Yes, exactly. And it's very much a matter of national pride that they're going to get everything done, and that it will be a smooth Olympics. China is really looking at this as their coming out party effectively for the last 20 years of development that have taken them from a very closed society with old style architecture, old style transportation, and a very closed social system to a rather open international feeling society. Right? It's a little bit bittersweet also, having been here back then. It felt more communal, if you will, when everybody was riding bicycles and you'd really run into people, have a closer interaction with people. But now with automobiles everywhere, it's in some ways feeling very much like LA or New York or something, where you don't really come into contact with a lot of the individuals as you make your way around during the day. So it's bittersweet. So, anyways, we'll catch up later, but that's the report that I have.
Well, continued good luck to you, Ralph. We look forward to seeing you again soon.
All right, we'll talk to you soon, Howard.
Thank you again to Ralph Miller of Ralph Miller Productions of Kentfield in San Francisco, California. And thanks to all of you for joining us tonight on this edition of My Country. I look forward to seeing you next Thursday. Good night.